Could it be that this new multipolar world that we are making our way into, and I think has really been this process of multipolarity, it's really been exacerbated throughout this whole current conflict, the economic war, the decline of the petrodollar, the rise of BRIC nations. Could it be that this is what really pose the greatest threat to the West and why they decided to embark in this mission? And I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And do you think that this actually caused the whole system of U.S. global hegemony to kind of implode?
Well, I think we're the authors of our own destruction, frankly. I wouldn't attribute or give that credit to somebody like Putin in Moscow by any stretch of the imagination.
Mhm.
But, to come to your point, I just finished writing something that will be published tomorrow in the American Conservative that effectively addresses this. And if you understand that Russia is not leaving Ukraine, that's number one. They're not withdrawing. They're not going to pull up stakes and leave. Then you have to understand that they will not lose in Ukraine. Suggesting that the Russians will lose in Ukraine is tantamount to suggesting that if we intervened in northern Mexico, that we would lose in Mexico. No, we're not going to lose in Mexico. We can't. They can't, because we're near everything. In other words, our airfields, our ports, our logistics, our intelligence, everything sits in close proximity to Mexico. If we decide to go in there, we're going to do pretty much whatever we want and stay as long as we like. I think that's the case for Russia and eastern Ukraine.
Mhm.
Now, initially, the goals were neutralize the Ukrainian state so that there are no foreign forces, foreign weapons, and so forth. Secondly, uh, grant autonomy or independence, whatever you want to call it, to the two Russian provinces, Donetsk and Lugansk in the east, who are Russian and don't want to forcibly be Ukrainianized. By the way, there are a lot of people like that in eastern Ukraine. And then lastly, Crimea. Renounce any claim to Crimea, because the whole thing is ahistorical. It's never been Ukrainian.
Correct.
It's been Russian since 1776, and before that, the Mongols and Tartars ran it for hundreds of years. Perhaps we should give them a hearing and let the Tartars come back along with the Mongols and decide if they want to get Crimea back from the Russians. But the Ukrainians, forget it. That's nonsense. So those were the minimal requirements, but this has gone on so long. Ukrainians have been so utterly stubborn, at least the ones that represent Zelensky, and I think to a large extent because of us. You mentioned Soros. I'm sure he has an influence. But I think we have seen this as an opportunity to bring NATO together, or so we think, and then hammer the Russians over the head by pushing the Ukrainian fight against Russia. Now, I think that's going to backfire. And you pointed to some things that have already begun. First of all, I don't see any evidence that these sanctions are going to work for any length of
Mhm.
time. Countries are already bypassing them. And then if you look at the really big players out there, China, as long as the border with Russia is secure and the Chinese support the Russians, the Chinese can absorb virtually all the oil, gas, minerals, metals, food in abundance that Russia produces. And the Chinese certainly aren't going to encourage the Russians to, commit suicide in order to make us happy, because they probably assume that if the Russians go down, it's only a matter of time until we try to organize something to destroy them. So I think the Chinese are in this for the long haul. And after all, they're what, the second biggest economy in the world. And then you have Japan, sits right offshore. The Japanese have said, oh, yes, of course, we support you 100%. However, we are going to continue to buy oil and gas from the Russians. And oh, by the way, we have joint projects with them north of Japan in the Kuril Islands and in the Northern Pacific. And we're going to continue running those joint operations. Well, Japan is what, the third largest or second largest economy? I mean, take your pick. Then you have the Germans, and the Germans have never been comfortable with this. The Germans have not felt threatened by the Russians, and with good reason. The Russian military is simply too small to threaten Europe. There's no evidence that the Russians want to do anything other than business with Western Europe. The Germans are huge partners for the Russians. They've only now just become the biggest partners for China in Europe. So when you look at the Germans, how long can the Germans live without Russian oil, gas, food, and so forth? The Germans just announced the other day that they're going to start rationing food products. Good Lord. Is Germany at war? I don't think so. And how long will that go? How well will that go down with the German population? Uh, they're saying they're going to pay into this Gazprom operation
Hmm.
and have their money turned into rubles in order to pay for the gas. We'll see how long that goes. But I don't see the Italians being very excited over this, and they're the next largest consumer of these Russian products. Then you have to look at the Netherlands and Belgium, even the Czech Republic, Austria, Hungary, even though Austria is not NATO. All of these states have much more at risk in this whole proposition than we do. Remember that the only reason we're miserable right now dealing with gas problems is because of Mr. Biden and his administration, who decided it was in the interests of the world that the United States stop being the number one energy producer. So we're suffering unnecessarily and probably will continue to do so under him. But we've also got serious problems now in agriculture because we're not getting the fertilizer we
Yeah.
need. And there are a whole number of products associated with petroleum that are produced in this country that are vital, not just to agriculture, but to so many other things. So we've shot ourselves in the foot. And then, of course, we printed all of this money. Russia does not have this odious debt that we do. And they're now tying the ruble to gold. Imagine that, going back to a gold standard. Well, that could do us in very quickly, as you know. I mean, we went off this thing for a reason so that we could print money and do as we like. And then you pointed out the petrodollar. Here are our friends in Saudi Arabia, the people that uh, Donald Trump worked so hard to bring together with the Israelis, the Arab peninsular Arabs, and they're now saying, well, we may do business in yuan. So where does the petrodollar go? What does that mean long term for the dollar as reserve currency? Our economy is very fragile.
Hmm.
It's not robust. This is not 1939, 40, 41, when we started to come out of the Depression, go into the war. We had all of this skilled labor ready to go back to work. Plus, we had a manufacturing base. We don't have it. We had it again in the early 1980s when Reagan was president. We could put the manufacturing base back into operation. What have we got? Our manufacturing base is somewhere overseas, China, Malaysia, Southeast Asia. We don't have it. It hasn't been repatriated. And since Biden became president, he made it very clear he has no intention of repatriating it. And simultaneously, how many millions of people have we let into the country about whom we know nothing? They're not only unvetted, we can't assimilate them, we can't employ them. What's going to happen to those people once things here become scarce? You know, scarcity changes things. We're a nation that has enjoyed abundance since the 1940s. What happens when scarcity replaces abundance? Then people start to look around and start saying, wait a minute, where are you from? And why are we feeding you?
Hmm.
These are bad things. No one in Washington has thought through anything. It's just astonishing. There is no strategy. Everything is impulse and emotion, no reason or rationality.